Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and today I was going to make a video all about Cyclops, believe it or not. But then in testing him, I realized that he's kind of a sack of shit, and he's not very good for pretty much everything in Marvel Future Fight aside from Shadowland. So rather than just focusing on Cyclops and making a standalone video just for this one guy, I thought I would focus on all three of the sort of forgotten X-Men. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to take a look at all of the X-Men, well, three. There's Magik, Cyclops, and Rogue, who have basically been abandoned by updates. And meanwhile, Storm got a uniform, Colossus got a uniform, even Beast got a uniform. Not that it's very good, but it's still something. These three X-Men, and you can say, Cyclops and Rogue are very similar to Storm and Beast. And then on the other hand, Magik is obviously Colossus' brother, so it's bizarre that all of these other X-Men have gotten upgrades and uniforms, yet the three characters, and I mean Cyclops and Rogue are core X-Men, have basically gotten nothing. Cyclops got a lot back in 2018 and 2017 with multiple uniforms, but since then he's been sort of left in the dust. And this is kind of the example. In 1 minute, I've cleared about less than 3 bars. His damage is just pathetic. Even with strikers, his damage is so low, even with Nick Fury and Coulson. But I'm doing this to illustrate a point. This is stage 25. So even though Magik doesn't have a uniform, even though Magik doesn't have a damage proc obelisk, and we'll go ahead and we'll compare their builds in just a minute. We're gonna go back into the same stage now, but we're gonna use Magik instead of Cyclops. And Cyclops, he's got some value in the game, but it's actually not where you might expect it. So we're going to go back into the same stage now, but we're going to look at Magik instead of Cyclops. Now, of course, Magik is a X-Gene sub-character, so she's a lot more expensive and rare than Cyclops, but you can see that the damage is night and day. I think it took, what did we say, a minute to clear down to about 14.5. Let's see how long this takes Magik. And keep in mind, Magik in the meantime has summons. She has invincibility. She has healing. She has iframes. I don't even need Anti-Venom. It's nice to have him along, but I don't even need him. And remember, she does not have a damage proc. So how much faster would this go? You can kind of throw your speculation in the comments. How much faster would this go? Same strikers if I could proc every time on the 5th skill or the 4th skill. It's actually not going that much faster than it was for Cyclops, but it is going faster, and you can see here we're going to get to where he was with about 15 seconds to spare, and we were kind of cooped up in the corner here, having to back up and sort of reset because we don't want to get hit by those tornadoes. So in the same amount of time, in about a minute, we got almost 1 extra bar. That's not a tremendous amount of damage difference when you just compare the actual damage, but then when you compare their builds, you realize that it's actually quite a large difference. We're not even going to try Rogue because she's a physical damage, almost exclusively physical damage. But if we go back over to Cyclops, Rogue, and Cyclops, Rogue, and Magik, we can see that it becomes, a much more interesting story for these three forgotten X-Men. Okay, sure, Rogue. So we are going to be using her leadership. Let's swap this around so we don't use that leadership. Anyways, in the case of Cyclops, he has a guard break 120 proc. He's got crit damage and crit rate Uru, and he's got Power of Angry Hulk, and he's got a legendary uniform. So all of that is putting him, over 23,000 energy attack. On the other hand, Magik, she does have the crit rate or the crit damage Uru, but she's got a max HP crit rate invincibility obelisk, which is much more defensive, and she doesn't have a uniform, and she's got Power of Angry Hulk as well. So she's sitting on 22,600 energy attack. But obviously with a much more defensive build, you'd expect Magik to be worse, but she's actually quite a bit better than Cyclops, even though Cyclops is, sporting a legendary uniform, he's the leader of the X-Men, yada yada yada. But then you have a character like Rogue. She's a speed type. You expect her to be good against, let's say, Corvus World Boss Ultimate, and I don't even have to go into the stage for you guys to guess. She's pretty trash. Now, my Rogue build is not very good as is, because I built her primarily for Alliance Conquest, and believe it or not, PvP back in the day when she was actually decent for PvP, when she had a pretty interesting meta leadership, which they had to patch. She actually got nerfed. But, all three of these characters, I think, have potential to be very strong if they get a uniform that can really accentuate their and kind of highlight their strengths. Rogue has a lot of dodge, she has a lot of damage reduction, she has a lot of defense. Even for a speed type, you can see she has almost 10,000 energy and physical defense. So if they could give her something like, you know, 50% all defense as a passive, and if they could bump that decrease all damage received, if they could bump that up to like 40 or 50%, Rogue could become a very difficult to kill speed type, and she could become a nice counter to a lot of blast type characters. But again, it all depends on whether they want to do that and whether they want to rework and buff Rogue. And I don't know when they will, but you know, she has some pretty decent moves too. She removes active buff on 2 of her skills, so it kind of reflects the fact that she drains people's powers. She doesn't get their powers, but she at least takes them away. So she could theoretically take away Captain Marvel's radiant form, which is kind of cool, I'm not gonna lie. She should get an iframe ignore skill to do that a bit more effectively, in my opinion. But right now, I don't even really want to showcase Rogue because you know, even despite of my, or in spite of my you know, rank 1100, she's still really bad. Like, she struggles at stage 50 for Shadowland, let's just put it that way. But looking over back at Cyclops now, Cyclops is also a really interesting character, and while Netmarble hasn't chosen to buff him, if they did at any time, he could also become a really nice counter to a lot of the annoying characters that we have, like Ant-Man right now, and possibly also Captain Marvel and Nova, because he has the ignore targeting. He has iframe ignore. He was the first character to get it, and it also has penetration for super armor, barrier, shield, immune, and invincible. So it's the same sort of skill, although much less damage and much fewer hits. It's the same sort of skill as Nova's second skill, and on top of that, for his tier 2 passive visor upgrade, he has 50% ignore dodge. So in my case, I comboed this 50% ignore dodge with his 39% ignore dodge on his obelisk, and now if you check this out, and this is actually kind of cool, you could build Cyclops to take on Corvus Glaive. So we're going to go ahead against a stage 35 Corvus Glaive. We're going to drop in this team, which is what I was practicing with Cyclops, and we're going to drop in these 5 strikers. Now, we are using strikers. It is Corvus, who's the easiest world boss, or one of the easiest world bosses in terms of defenses, and it's only a stage 35, and I do have a raid level of 499, and I do have a bunch of premium cards, but he's got a 120 obelisk. He doesn't have a CTP of energy or anything crazy like that, and he can pump out some pretty impressive damage. I got bled though, to go up against Corvus, and if I get the strikers going, it actually gets even better, and it goes by even faster. So it's kind of interesting. Although you could build Rogue to be offensive, and she may be able to take on Corvus Glaive because she's a speed type. I would imagine that with his 50% ignore dodge, Cyclops is probably going to have an easier time against Corvus, even though he gets a 50% damage reduction as a blast type. So it's kind of interesting. Magik and Cyclops are both blast types, but Magik does way better than Cyclops against Cull Obsidian World Boss. Then, you know, even though Rogue is a speed type and Cyclops is a blast type, Cyclops seems to do better against Corvus. And of course, from like a comic books perspective, it makes sense because I think Cyclops is going to die here. It makes sense because Cyclops, you know, can see things, and he can shoot long distances, and he has that sort of hawk vision. It sort of makes sense, not hawk vision, but you know, his whole thing has to do with his eyes. At the same time, it's just a weird situation that they're in Marvel Future Fight, where these characters don't really embody, you know, the traits that you would expect them to, given their typing, but they more accurately reflect just possibly things from the comic, or just things that just happen to relate to the comics but weren't necessarily planned that way. I think I'm dead here with the bleed, but he can definitely clear the stage. I was getting pretty unlucky with a lack of mind control, and then he was just hitting me with bleeds every single time. Again, it's not really supposed to be a showcase video. This is more about talking about not only why these characters suck, so really low damage, low hits, low movement, no real meta effects, no penetration, no, well, some of them have self-healing, but it's low self-healing at that. And then also to point out the fact that, you know, Cyclops has ignore iframe and lots of ignore dodge and penetration. Rogue has remove active buffs and damage reduction and all defense, which makes her possibly super tanky and super annoying because she's constantly stealing your buffs. And then Magik, on the other hand, similar to Rogue, she also has 35% decrease all damage received, which is huge. And she also has that heal from Mixed Magic passive, which pops for 10% every time she uses 3 skills. She gets extra self buffs. She doesn't really have anything other than the self heal and the damage reduction, but 35% is a really high number to start off with. So basically what I'm saying is, while these 3 characters suck, they have the blueprints for potentially very strong characters in the future when they get level 70, when they get gear 25, uniforms, etc. And they also have the blueprint to go kind of either way. I see Cyclops more offensively, but having Ignore iframe will always make him possibly a threat for PvP. If they triple the damage and triple the hits on his 3rd skill, that's a one-shot right there to a lot of combat types. Not that a lot of them have iframes, but who knows, maybe Mr. Fantastic will be coming soon, or Namor will be combat or something like that. Rogue, super tanky speed type. We don't have many of those that don't rely on dodge, so that would be a really cool, interesting mechanic to have someone more like Deadpool, not necessarily with a healing factor, but with some healing and then just super beefy defenses. And then Magik is kind of like a mixture of both. She's got the damage, but she's also got the healing and the damage reduction to go along with the summons. So yeah, very cool, interesting characters with a lot of rich history in the comics. They have a lot of fans. But Netmarble has kind of just, I mean, Magik has never gotten a uniform, which is bizarre, because she has quite a few different looks. Rogue has a uniform, but it's ugly as sin, and it's from like 2 years ago, which is crazy. And then Cyclops' uniform is a little bit newer, but it's still from like a year and a half ago, almost. So yeah, I think it's high time. Possibly in the future, I mean, I don't want Namor to get a uniform that soon, but the Phoenix Force 5, or whatever you want to call them, includes 2 of these members, Cyclops and Magik, to go along with Colossus and Namor, and I believe Emma Frost. So I don't know where that leaves Rogue, but I don't know what else to suggest for these characters. They have tons of different looks, so Netmarble could literally pick anything. And I do hope that for the last X-Men update of this year, because we should be getting at least one more, we do see uniforms for these 3 characters. So let me know what you think of them. Let me know what you think of the interesting sort of interplay, like, you know, Cyclops is better than Rogue for the speed world boss, but Magik is better than Cyclops for the, you know, energy damage world boss, and so on and so forth. And hit me up with suggestions for what uniforms they could get, if they could actually come together for one particular update, or if they should just kind of be chosen based on their best look, like Savage Land Rogue and whatever. And what else do you think? Maybe Havoc will come with a Cyclops update, who knows? Hit me up in the comments down below. Let me know what you think. Subscribe if you enjoyed the content. You can want to support me. And of course, if you like what you see, I hope to see you later today. Take care.